Far beyond the dust tracks of civilization, nestled deep within the lush yet mysterious terrain of the African interior, lies Namoroko, a forgotten village untouched by time. The surrounding hills rise like ancient sentinels, black and brooding, while the jungle whispers old names only the wind can understand. In this place, the sun sets red and slow, and the people walk as though the ground remembers their ancestors. There were no maps to Namoroko, only stories, stories now fading, like the bones they were carved into. In the middle of Namoroko, where elders whisper and children dare not play after dusk, stood the bone tree, a ghostly white tree, its bark smooth as bone and cold to the touch. From its branches hung hundreds of carved bones, each one etched with a name, a prayer, a memory. This was no ordinary tree. In this African village, the bone tree was history. A living record of joy, betrayal, love, and loss. And now, it had started to tremble. The bones began to fall. At first one, then another, clattering against the earth with a sound that echoed across the village like thunder without rain. The villagers of Namoroko, draped in linen and dust, watched in horror. A falling bone meant something had been forgotten, or worse, denied. The elders murmured ancient words, but no ritual could fix what was broken. The tree was not just mourning. It was warning. Nyah stood alone under the bone tree's pale limbs. Her skin glowed with youth, but her eyes held storms older than her years. In Namoroko, girls were taught to fetch water and carry silence, but Nyah listened instead, to the dirt, the wind, the bones. The tree had whispered to her since childhood in dreams made of thunder. And now, awake, it was whispering again. A summons. A reckoning. Kama, Nyah's grandmother, was the last of the bone weavers in Namoroko. Her eyes had long faded to milk white, but her hands still knew the language of the dead. She threaded bones into necklaces, each one humming with the memory of someone gone. In the heart of rural Africa, she held on to traditions most had buried. The tree doesn't lie, she often said, but it weeps when we do. And now, it was weeping loud. The children changed. In Namoroko's dusty courtyards, they began to speak in voices not their own, deep, old, trembling with grief. A girl no older than 5 whispered the name of a midwife dead 30 years. A boy began to draw ritual patterns in the dirt with terrifying accuracy. The villagers began to fear their own young. In this African village, the past was not buried, it was waking inside their children. Chief Jobo stood before the gathered crowd, wrapped in his red ceremonial cloth, his voice a mask for his fear. The curse lies in her bones, he shouted, pointing at Kama. The villagers of Namoroko stirred uneasily. Some believed him. Others looked at the bone tree, which dropped yet another bone with a loud crack. In this corner of Africa, where every tradition was sacred, the chief had forgotten one thing: the tree remembers. Nyah stepped beyond the last hut and entered the forbidden forest. The moon glowed above the African canopy, and the jungle whispered ancient lullabies only she could hear. Her bare feet kissed the dirt paths once trodden by seers and sinners alike. In Namoroko, no one ventured here after dark. But Nyah was not afraid. She was following a voice. And something in her blood knew the forest better than the village ever did. Buried beneath twisted roots, in the damp silence of the forest, Nyah found bones wrapped in cloth. Fresh. Red. Wrong. These were no ancestral offerings. These were evidence. The soil of rural Africa holds many secrets, but this one still bled. Etched into one femur, faded and trembling, was a girl's name long erased from village memory. A child sacrificed. A storm silenced. Back inside the cracked mud walls of their hut, Nyah faced Kama, firelight flickering between them. "You knew," she whispered. Kama's face did not change. "I knew," she said. "But the truth is not light. It is weight. And you were still learning to carry yourself." In Namoroko, stories were passed in silence. But this one had grown teeth. Kama reached for Nyah's hand. "Dig deeper. Beneath the bone tree. Beneath everything." Under the first rays of African dawn, Nyah dug. Her fingers blistered, her breath came ragged, but she did not stop. The villagers watched from doorways, silent. The bone tree towered above her, indifferent. And then, beneath the packed red earth, her fingers brushed something smooth and round. A drum. Bound in cracked hide, carved in spirals and teeth. And beneath that, a skull. Jobo's name was carved into its crown. The earth had spoken. Nyah returned to the village square like a spirit awakened. Her body caked in dust, her arms cradling the drum. The villagers of Namoroko, dressed in faded cloth and fear, parted to let her pass. She struck the drum once. The sky pulsed. The bone tree shook. And the bones began to hum, not fall, but sing. and then a shadow formed beneath its roots. She hovered just above the ground, barefoot, glowing, with hair braided in forgotten patterns. The ghost of the girl who had been sacrificed. "You buried me to keep the peace," she said, her voice echoing like rainfall in a clay pot. "But the storm never left. You only taught it to wait." Around her, the bones on the tree swayed, not with wind, but memory. Chief Jobo ran. His feet kicked dust as he pushed through the crowd. But the ground beneath Namoroko's heart does not forget. It opened like a mouth. Roots wrapped around his legs, pulling him down, inch by inch, until only his cries remained. The bone tree watched. The village stood still. And the forest exhaled. A single drop. Then two. Then the sky, so long silent, broke open. Rain fell on Namoroko like forgiveness. It painted rooftops, traced lines down faces, filled clay pots left forgotten. The villagers sobbed openly, standing in puddles like blessings. Children danced barefoot. Elders raised their arms. The bone tree shimmered in the mist. The past had been heard. The land had answered. She left the celebration quietly, the drum strapped to her back, her steps sure. Into the African wilderness she returned, not to flee, but to finish. The birds sang louder now. The vines parted. The forest knew her. And in its breath, she heard a promise: there was still more to learn. More to free. Behind a curtain of moss, the entrance pulsed. A cave sacred before even Namoroko had a name. Inside, the walls were etched with markings, spirals, suns, eyes, rivers. She set the drum down in the center. The air vibrated. And then, slowly, voices rose, layered, rhythmic, not language but legacy. She returned. The girl. Her spirit softer now, less fury, more peace. "You gave me back my voice," she said. "Now I give you memory." And she placed a hand above Nyah's heart. The drum glowed between them. In that moment, every story ever buried beneath Namoroko bloomed. Petals, soft and white, bloomed from the bone tree like snow falling upward. The villagers gasped. The tree, once only death, now gave life. The bones still hung, but they no longer mourned. They sang. A hymn for the living. A promise for the dead. She returned barefoot, soaked, eyes bright. The villagers of this small African world bowed, not because they were told, but because their bones demanded it. She was not a priestess, nor a queen. She was a mirror. A bridge. A daughter of memory. The child stepped forward. Small. Brave. Her fingers grazed the drum. Nyah looked down and saw her reflection in the girl's eyes. The cycle had begun again, not of silence, but of story. Not of hiding, but of holding. That night, Nyah sat by the fire, surrounded by wide-eyed children. No scrolls. No books. Just her voice, the drum, and the stars. She told of girls who listened, trees that remembered, storms that forgave. And when the children slept, the fire still burned. So did hope. Namoroko lived. Rain fell when needed. Crops sang green. Drums echoed across hills. Laughter became the new prayer. The bone tree stood at the heart of it all, now part shrine, part celebration. And no one dared forget again. She stood beneath its blossoms, eyes closed, hands on the drum. Not as a savior, but as a memory keeper. A rhythm bearer. The storm inside her had passed. And in its place grew balance. From the sky above the African hills, Namoroko looked small, but whole. Smoke rose from fires. Rain dotted rooftops. The bone tree bloomed quietly. And beneath it, Nyah hummed a tune from a time before time. A story not just heard, but felt. Africa remembered.